Hello, people of the world, and welcome to the Sonia Explores podcast. So, to start, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you out there who are listening in on my very, very first episode. So, I figured today I would share with you guys a little bit about me and my background, as well as 3 huge influences that have kind of shaped my spiritual journey. So the first influence I would have to say is my family and our cultural roots. And then after that, I would have to say it would be my experience in joining the Mormon church. And then lastly, my introduction to spiritualism and the occult. So I am a born and raised San Diegan. I currently still live here in this wonderful city. I also live with my 3 younger brothers, one of them who is still a teenager, and then my lovely kitty, who's so sweet, but very wild. She's about 5 months now, and yeah, that's my little blurb about me. So let's get into my first influence, my family. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Hmong people and our history, I will share a little bit of that with you guys today. So Hmong is actually spelled Hmong, and we are an indigenous ethnic group of Asia. So according to history, our origins lie in Mongolia and China, and we were seen as a threat to the Han Chinese. And so because of that, there were many, many wars that ensued. And because of these wars, they also led to a diaspora of our people. So as the diaspora came about, many of the Hmong people started going toward the south and then ended up in a lot of the countries that we know as Southeast Asia. So Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, those countries then ended up having more populations of Hmong people. Now, my family came from Laos and Thailand, and majority of the Hmong people or the Hmong population that has come to America came as a result of the Vietnam War. So during the Vietnam War, also known as the Secret War, or actually, they called it the Secret War, Hmong men were recruited to support the American troops. And in my opinion, I don't think my people were ready to take up such an order. We were a rural group of people, not industrialized in any way. We still lived off of the land and lived in huts and lived a simple life. And so when these American soldiers came, our world was torn apart. And for many, many years, my people have endured so much. And that has really given me a lot of strength. So there were times when many women didn't know if their husbands, brothers, and sons were going to come back home. And when the war finally ended, things didn't go back to normal. We were targeted as traitors. And so there was a genocide of my people within their own homes. And the thing is my people, we're not seen as people of those countries. Like, we are still our own ethnic group. So my family, they lived in Thailand. Or no, not Thailand, I'm sorry. They lived in Laos. But what my point is that the Hmong people, we don't have our own home country. Even though we say our homeland is like Laos and Thailand, they're not our home countries really, because Hmong people aren't Thai, Hmong people aren't Laotian, Hmong people aren't Cambodians. So this definitely makes things tricky. So this whole idea of not having our own home country, I think, has definitely impacted me in understanding the concept of home. But I'll save that for another episode. So, because of the Vietnam War, the UN realized, oh, we kind of started something and we kind of have to fix this because these people are getting killed and murdered, and it's kind of our fault. So there were refugee camps that were opened in Thailand, and so that's where many of the Hmong people fled to. And then once they were in the refugee camps, they were then processed to either go to America or Australia, France, first world countries. And that is how my parents came to America. They met in a refugee camp and decided to get married and come over to America together. So my parents were sponsored by another family member who had come to America before they did. And when they came here to America, they were converted to becoming Mormon. So before I get into my whole experience with the Mormon church, I didn't even get to tell you guys about the Hmong belief system. So the Hmong people are actually pretty similar to Native Americans. And why I say that is because we believe in animism, which is the idea that all things have a spirit. And I immediately started thinking of Pocahontas, but anyways, yeah. And so animism, and then we also have shamans and a lot of superstitions and beliefs around all of that, the spirit world and things of that nature. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, she actually was a shaman. And for several years when I was a child or a kid, she lived with us, her and my grandfather. And I can still remember she had an altar, and it was pretty large. I would say almost kind of like a bookshelf. And on that altar, she had space for candles and incense and stuff like that. And on the altar itself, it was made from wood, but then my grandfather would make these, they were almost like decorative paper, and they would be glued on the altar. And one of the things that I can relate it to would be like in Mexico, where they have papel picado, which is, like the paper with the cutout designs. And so I also remember seeing these white strings coming up from behind the altar, and then they would go up on the ceiling and then run along the ceiling and then towards the door. And I still haven't really, to this day, asked anybody about what that is or anything like that. My parents were very I don't want to say secretive, but they weren't always willing to explain why we did what we did and any of that until I got older. I had to ask or ask other people. So, since my grandmother was a shaman, I actually do remember having several animal sacrifices in our living room. It sounds pretty like gruesome and whatnot, but when you live, when that's like a norm, you don't think of it as weird. Obviously, I grew up here in America, and I just remember my grandmother always saying, "Don't tell people what we do. You're not supposed to talk about this." And just kind of told me to keep it like hush hush. And as a child, I was very oblivious. So I was just like, okay, all right, sure. And now that I am a full-fledged adult and I reflect back to this, it was it was very interesting. And again, like I said, it has influenced my spiritual path today. And don't worry, I will be doing more episodes in the future on Hmong shamanism and our belief system and stories around that. So, moving on from that, so when my parents came to America, they ended up getting involved in the Mormon church. And so I believe they got converted. And the thing about the Mormon church is once you're in their system, you're in the system. So they are great at record keeping. That's one of the things that the church has excelled at, is keeping records of people. And so my parents ended up actually moving from like San Diego proper and then moved more north a bit, so North County. And so when they moved to North County, they became inactive. And that's the term that Mormons use for people who don't go to church anymore. And I do recall when I was younger, elders would always come over to our house and read scripture with us. And then I got a little bit older and they would always ask us like if I wanted to get baptized. And eventually, it wasn't until I got into middle school, there were some elders that came. And at that point, me and my brother Shaw and Dew were all at the age of having the opportunity to get baptized. Hey y'all, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. And BT dubs, it's how I make mine. So it has everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. So Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is completely, totally free. So if you're interested in making that podcast that you've been thinking about forever ago, go and download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So in the Mormon church, when you become 7, that's when they believe that you are at an age that you can make the decision to choose Christ. And so all of us decided to get baptized, and it was a very lovely experience. We got to put on these white jumpsuits, and we got dunked at the stake center, and it was good. Many of my memories with the Mormon church are actually really fond. I loved the sense of community that there was, and everybody was just so friendly and helpful. I don't know if that's just what I experienced because I was oblivious to a lot of things as a young person. But yeah, that was my experience and I enjoyed it. But when I got into high school, my sophomore year, my dad decided that he didn't want to go to church anymore. And so that played a huge role of me becoming inactive. And his reason was that he just didn't like going to church anymore because he felt like an outsider. He felt like he was always the butt of everybody's jokes. And yeah, because the whole entire ward, everybody was white, and we were the only non white family. There were other wards, like Spanish wards and whatnot, but like, we don't understand Spanish, so we weren't gonna join the other wards. So it was either Spanish or English white church. And so my dad was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I also don't want to participate in this tithing, which is like 10% of your income you had to give to the church. And so he was just not having it. And so I could have continued going to church regardless of whether or not my family went, but I just didn't really have a strong desire to. And as time progressed, I realized it wasn't the church for me because they were very against, they're very homophobic. And I realized that that's not a value that I could live with or be a part of. So that's that. And one of the reasons why I actually was kind of glad to not go to church anymore or be part of the church was the fact that when you get into high school, you have to go to this thing called seminary, which was like more studying of the scripture and the Book of Mormon. So you had to get up every morning before school to go to that. And I was just like, I kind of want to be able to sleep in. So yeah. But overall, I really loved my experience with the church because I got to get to know or learn about Jesus Christ, who I think is a very, very important person to know and understand. And regardless of whether you believe in him or not, I still think he's a very important person to learn from. So yeah, so sophomore year, that's when I stopped being Mormon. And then junior year is actually when I got to learn about spiritualism. But before I move on into that whole story, I also wanted to share about the whole, well, Sonia, if you liked going to church and stuff, why don't you find a different church or go to another church? And for me, I'm not against Christians or Christianity or have like a repulsiveness towards that, but I just feel deep down inside it's just not for me. But I still do learn and read scripture every now and then because I do have friends who are Christian and I just like to learn. So I don't limit myself on any kind of spiritual information that could be useful to my life. And it also creates connection, in my opinion, if other people do. So, sophomore year, I stopped being Mormon. Junior year, I become really close friends with this boy. And he asks me, hey, would you be open to going to this group with me? It's a group that my mom goes to every week. And I feel like it's something you might like and you might enjoy. And so, of course, I'm like, sure, why not? You know, what, let's check it out. So it was held every Tuesday night. And what would happen is there'd be circle held. And that's what they would say. We're going to hold circle. And I had no idea at this time what the heck that meant. And it wasn't until years later that I was like, oh, holding circle was pretty much another word for we're holding a seance, more or less. And this is where I really learned how to meditate, really, and become more spiritual and understand that there is more to this universe. And so every week I would go to this group. And eventually my friend stopped going, but I still kept going. And the woman who held these meetings, rest in peace, she was such a sweet and lovely lady. Like, she was the embodiment of like love. Like her energy was just very loving. Just like, ooh, like grandma hugs almost, you know? And she was older too. And that was the interesting thing about this group, was that everybody there was way older than me and my friend. They were all like over 40. And so, yeah, so they would hold circles every week. And in retrospect, I didn't really understand a lot of the things that they were teaching me, but now I'm like, oh, that's what that was. So we would start with the Lord's Prayer, and then we would sing a song or something to elevate the vibration in the room, which, like I said, at that time, I didn't know that's what we were doing and why we did that. And then, so after that singing, then everybody would like sit down in chairs and we'd be in a circle, and everybody would kind of just relax, close their eyes, and just receive, right? And be receptive. And then the mediums in the room who were there would say, I have a message for so and so. Would you like to receive this message? And then the person would say, yes, I would like to receive the message today. And then they would go forth with the message. And the message could be from a deceased loved one, or from spirit, or your spirit guides. And during these circles, it had also opened me up to meditation, because when we did have these circles, I noticed that my mind would go into a meditative trance. There'd be moments or times that I got to experience where like I didn't even feel my body anymore. Or I would feel certain energetic, like a I had one time a medium was like, oh, so and so is here. They're like behind you. And I like kind of felt like a presence behind me. It was, I mean, for some people, I think they would get scared, but for me, I didn't think anything of it. I thought this was like, it was the coolest thing, you know? Um, so yeah. I also want to share with you guys one of my first messages that I received, and it was from this older gentleman. This older gentleman happened to also be really good friends with my friend's mom, and so I got to get to know him a little bit more and know him on a personal level. He actually gave me a haircut one time, because when he was in the Navy, he was the barber or whatever. And so his message was, one day, Sonia, Spirit would like you to know that they're looking for a boyfriend for you. And do not worry, the right one will come. And when he does come, it will be very, very lovely experience. And like, I'm like, okay, Spirit's looking for a boyfriend for me? Like, that's crazy, because during that time, I mean, this is like junior year, right? During this time, I was reading like a lot of teen romance novels, you know? So I was definitely really into that, like, ooh, I want to have this like experience with a boy, you know, like catching feelings and whatnot, right? Which is funny because like prior to that, like prior years and like in middle school, I was boy crazy. I mean, I've always been boy crazy, don't get me wrong, because I'm a Libra and my seventh house is in Pisces, or is ruled by Pisces. So I'm just a romantic, right? But in middle school, I was very like, ugh, boys, like, why do all these girls just want to have a boyfriend? I don't freaking need a boyfriend or whatever, you know? But then secretly I was just like, ooh, pining like over this boy, and just like, I just liked this idea of like having a crush on someone. And so then, let's see. So then junior year, that summer leading to senior year, I actually do meet a boy, and then I did end up having my very first boyfriend during my senior year. And it literally was kind of like the whole like first love thing, you know. We were very infatuated with each other. Sex was involved. We lost our virginity to each other. Like, it was very much everything that I had wanted and desired in a first love experience. Even the ending, like, I can't even complain about. Um, yeah, so that was a really fun experience. And one of the things that kind of corroborated and got me to kind of believe in this idea of life after death in this way was the fact that many mediums that I've come across have said similar things. And that one similar thing was every time they tapped in, they were like, there is a female here. She is a grandmother energy. And they would tell me, you know, like that she's always watching over me. And even when I was little, she would watch over me and my brothers, and that she had chosen me, my soul, to be my mother's daughter because she was my so basically the maternal or grandmother energy that all the mediums talked about was my mom's mom, and she had passed when my mom was very young. So I'm like, there's no way that all these mediums could say this, like bring up the same lady, you know? And that some of the things that they said, I went later after I stopped going to this group, I asked my mom about it, and she's like, yeah, that's like your grandma, all right, you know? And so, yeah. And man, I just learned so much in that group. I learned about what Reiki was. I didn't even know what Reiki, I didn't really understand the extent of it. I received, it's just so funny because during this time I got to receive and experience all these things like pretty much for free, because it's just funny now where we are right now. I mean, it's great that we are all so exposed to spirituality now, but like every spiritual service is like money, 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 you know? So it was nice that I got to experience these things for free. um, yeah, I'll share with you guys another episode about Reiki and my experience with Reiki and how I became certified and all that, my experiences down the road. But yeah, so this group just opened me up to the world of spirituality. So I'm just so grateful for it all. And I do know that it was all very synchronistic and meant to be, because if I had not gotten to experience those things that I did within that group, I don't think years after that I would have been able to go through the very troubling times that I had went through. So yeah, so there you go. Those were my three main influences that have really impacted my spiritual journey. If you guys have any questions or would like me to talk or share about any specific things that I mentioned, feel free to message me over on Instagram. My Instagram is Sonia Explores _ Sonia is spelled Sisonia for those of you guys who might think that it's with a Y. It's not. And I hope you guys have a lovely day, night, morning, wherever you guys are. I hope you guys have a lovely weekend, and hopefully we'll be chatting again soon.